Okay, we are going to go over the review since we have a test tomorrow. So we are going to focus on a couple of questions a little bit more than others, but I am going to go through all of these. Okay, your review over congruent and similar triangles since we have a test tomorrow. All right, so U equals 9.8, R equals 24, S equals 90, and T equals 66. Okay, they're congruent triangles, so all their parts are congruent to each other. Right? Yeah. Number one, each little part. I know when I first read this, I thought they were talking about similar triangles, and I had to really read it carefully for congruent. Once I knew it was congruent, it was super easy. All the angles are equal to each other, all the sides are equal to each other. Number two, these says these two are congruent triangles. We have two little marks here, we have two little marks here. So I know 8 equals x minus 3. It doesn't equal 10 because 10 has one mark and this has two. Okay, so 8 equals x minus 3. How am I going to get x by itself? Add 3 to both sides. X equals 11. Okay, so I had a lot of people ask the question about number 2. Do we have any other thoughts about number 2 or don't understand parts of number 2? So the 10 is actually extra information that we don't need. Okay, it is set up to kind of confuse you a little bit. We're focused up here, right? Listening?
Yeah.
Okay. So 10 only has one line at 10, so these two sides right here that only have one line would be equal to each other, but I don't need to use this information in order to solve x. Okay? Number 3 is our first proof in this packet. Shh, gentlemen. Number 3 is our first proof. So we're going to mark up my picture first before we do our statements and reasons. Okay. BD bisects angle ABC. I like to kind of highlight the angle we're talking about. And I know it bisects it, so that means it cuts it in half. So I know both of those angles right there are congruent to each other. Then I know that AB and BC are congruent. That's a given. Is there any other side or angle here that I know is congruent to each other? I know BD is congruent to BD by reflexive. So this triangle will be congruent by side, angle, side. Gentlemen, do you need to be separated? Then you need to stop talking while I'm talking, please. If you have a question, please let me know. Otherwise, keep your mouth shut, please.
All right.
So we have side, angle, side. Now remember, this does not say two triangles are congruent to each other. It says two sides are, so I'm going to have to use that CPCTC. Remember, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent? You have to use that at the end. So I have statements and reasons. So my first one is my first given. BD bisects angle ABC. Given. Step 2. I don't have anything is congruent to itself. So I can't move on yet. So I'm going to say angle ABD is congruent to angle CBD by definition of angle bisector. Okay? Remember I used it right here, so I'm using it again. Now see how I have two things that are congruent to each other? That's how I know I can move to the next given. Okay? So step 3, AB is congruent to BC, given. Again, this is a given that gives me two things are congruent to each other, right here. Therefore, I can move on to the next part. So I've run out of givens, so I have to look at my picture because I only have two things that are congruent. In my picture, I've got two things right next to each other. So I can say BD is congruent to BD by reflexive. And again, this is stating something is congruent to each other, so I can move on. Well, I have three things are congruent to each other, so I can state that triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD by side angle side. But that is not the end of my proof, because it says prove that AD is congruent to CD. So my step 6, AD is congruent to CD. That's by CPCTC. Two triangles are congruent, all their parts are congruent. Question about 3, that was a big one. So remember, I marked up my picture. Found 3 things, sides or angles that are congruent to each other. Then stated that they are congruent by side angle side. Then I started to do my proof, not moving on from a given until I have things that are congruent to each other. Okay? Then remember, I had to use CPCTC. So I'm not sure why this is still an issue. And I told you guys to put your phones in your backpacks, and I don't know why we think. Let's go, Ken. What's going on? Don't think I don't know that you still have your phone out, and I've asked you to put them in your backpacks. You can't use it. I can hold it in my pocket if you can't handle it. So it needs to go in your backpack or in my hand. Where is it? It's in your pocket, right? So let's go put it away. Just while I'm going over the reviews, guys. Well, don't you want to get a good grade on your test? Remember, these are worth 100 points. It's really going to make or break your grade. I know you don't like it, and I don't know you don't like getting on your phone, and I understand that, but I do know what you're doing. Okay. If two polygons are similar, then their corresponding angles must be what?
Similar.
Congruent.
That's the word. Oh, I get it.
Congruent. If two polygons are similar, then their corresponding sides must be what? Proportional.
I can't function without my phone.
You can. I know it's hard. Okay. Which of these triangles is not similar to the others? First, second, third, or fourth?
Fourth.
There you go.
Fourth.
Okay. It just reminds me of that Sesame Street song. Like, one of these things is not like the other. One of these things is not the one.
Freshman.
All right.
We have a question.
Yes.
How is number 4? Yeah.
How is number 4 what?
Number 6, how's the 4th one not the same?
Okay. So these two sides are congruent to each other. Therefore, these two angles must be congruent to each other, and they have to be 45 because this is 90. 180 minus 90, we have 90 left over, have to split it in half. If this is 90 and this is 45, I'm answering somebody's question. If this is 90 and this is 45, the other one has to be 45. If this is 45 and these two sides are the same, this has to be 45, this has to be 90. This isn't even 90 degrees, even if it looks like it, because 44 and 44 makes 88, not 90, which means this is going to be more than 90 degrees. Okay, that's why it's not similar. Okay. 7 through 11. 7 through 11, we are going to say how they are congruent and then make a congruency statement. Okay? So number 7, I have two parallel lines cut by a transversal. These two angles are congruent by alternate interior. This is congruent by reflexive, so we have side, angle, side. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle CDA. When I walked around, a lot of you had the right answer but didn't write down that the two triangles were congruent to each other. Don't forget to do that, okay? You don't want to lose points in your quiz. Number 8. We know these two are both 90 by linear pair postulate. We know this is congruent by reflexive. We have angle side side. Remember, it spells a bad word. It doesn't work. Okay? But it is a right triangle, so we can use hypotenuse leg. Triangle BAD is congruent to triangle CAD. Bad is congruent to CAD. Okay, number 9. We know this is congruent to each other by reflexive. So we know it's side, 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 and that's triangle WLR is congruent to triangle RXW. Okay. Number 10. A and C are both right triangles. And we can see that DF is congruent to DF. But we only have 2 things. So are these 2 triangles congruent to each other? No. This is not congruent. One more on this page, guys. Number 11. These 2 sides are congruent to each other by reflexive. So these triangles are congruent by side, angle, side. So again, that's triangle XAC is similar to triangle QAC. How are we feeling about this page? Any big questions?
How do you
We're doing
know,
well.
like, if it's like angle side side or like side angle side?
Okay, so I had a question about how, excuse me, shh. How do we know what to call them? Now, do you see how the angle is in between these 2 sides? So that's why it's side, angle, side. Okay? This, I have 3 sides. Okay? Hypotenuse leg because I have side, side, angle. See how the angle is not in between them? That's how I'm getting it. If it was angle, angle, side, I would have it set up where I would have 2 angles with the side in between. Okay? It doesn't matter where you start. If I look right here at this angle, I see there are sides on either side. So I have to make it so there's sides on either side. Yeah? Okay. Other questions about 7 through 11? Let's turn it over. Okay, we're starting some similarity, and this was a big problem that people were asking about for the proof. Okay? We need to find x and y using proportions. Okay? If we look here, 5 is on the corresponding side as 10. Okay, so we're going to go say 5 over 10. Now we want to find x's. So see how 12 is on the bottom right here, and so is x minus 1. So we say 12 over x minus 1. Now we're going to cross multiply. 10 times 12 is 120. 5 times x minus 1 is 5x minus 5. Then we just add the 5 to both sides. 125 equals 5x. Then we divide both sides by 5. So x equals 25. Okay? We're going to do the same thing for y. We still start with that 5 over 10, except this time we're going to do what number? To find y, what am I going to use?
X.
No. What side over here corresponds with the ones that have y in it? 13. So I'm going to have 13 over y plus 3. So I get 130 equals 5y plus 15. I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. And I get 115. Remember, the recording picks up everything you're saying. Equals 5y. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5. And y equals 23. Okay, number 13. I have to look and see which one of these 2 I think goes together. 13 was a big one too, where people asked a lot of questions about it. Okay, the first thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to set up corresponding sides. So I'm going to look at the green one right here and this purple one. I just outline them just so we have a better idea. So if I say 8, I'm going to put that over 2. If I say 20, I'm going to put it over 20, and 17 over 14. Well, right away, I know this isn't going to work, right? Because 8 over 2 is 4, and 20 over 20 is 1. So that doesn't work. So let's try the green and the yellow. Okay? So we're going to say 8 over 6.4 equals 17 over 13.6 equals 20 over 16. Well, all of these, when I divide them, give me 1.25. Shh. Okay? So triangle ABC is similar to triangle GHI with a scale factor of 1.25. Okay? All right, we're going to look at number 14. 14, I think, is one of the most important problems you have because it's like real life. Okay? You're going to need this to find the height of the tree. Okay? You may someday need to find the height of something that's taller than you can measure with a ruler. Okay? So I'm going to say the height of the boy, 6 feet, or man, over the height of the tree equals the distance from the mirror and the boy and the distance from the mirror and the tree. Then we just cross multiply. We get 84 equals 3x. We divide both sides by 3, and we get the tree is 28 feet. Okay. Yep. That's all you have to do. Setting up those similar triangles. We're not done with the third page, and we have 4 pages. Okay. We're going to go ahead and see if BC is parallel to DE. In order to see if they're parallel, the sides should be proportional to each other. Does 2 over 4 equals 3.75 over 5? No. So it's not parallel. Turn it over, and we can see, use this information for 16. Yes.
You know my birthday today?
Happy birthday, Kevin. Okay. Let's look at 16. The first part of 16 tells me that BD and AE are parallel to each other, which means 6 over 8 has to equal 4 over x. Okay? Then we just cross multiply. We get 6x equals 32. We divide both sides by 6, and we get x equals 5 1/3. And that's it. The whole problem. Focus. We just got this page to do.
Hey, you told me you can't copy the fashion.
Okay. This second part, let's focus, guys, because this second part of 16 is the one that people are getting wrong the most. Okay, so let's focus on that. I'm going to break these triangles into this overlapping triangle into the 2 separate triangles that it is. This length is 20. This is 16. This big length here is 17. But this part right here, I've got the x, but I don't know t to x. Well, it's going to be 17 minus x. When I break it up into 2 triangles like that, I think it makes it easier to set up my proportion. I'm going to say little over big, so I'm going to say 16 over 20 equals 17 minus x over 17. I'm going to cross multiply, giving me 272 equals 340 minus 20x. I'm going to subtract 340 from both sides. And I get negative 68 equals negative 20x divided by negative 20 gives me x equals 3.4. Okay? So just don't forget that 17 minus x. That's the part that I have people having trouble with. Okay, 17 through and 18 should be pretty self-explanatory. You're literally just listing the angles that are congruent, the sides that are proportional, similarity statement. So, angle A is congruent to angle what? D. Angle B is congruent to angle? Angle C is congruent to angle E. Okay? So AB, focus on this. AB over DF equals BC over EF equals CA over EB. Those are all proportional to each other. So triangle ABC is similar to triangle DFE. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with 18. Angle C is congruent to angle U. Angle X is congruent to angle X. Angle Y is congruent to angle Z. So XY goes on top of Z, yeah, which equals CX over, good, which equals CY over UZ.
Oh, it's UZ?
So triangle XCY is similar to triangle XYZ. Okay, now we just got these 3 proofs, guys, and we're all done. I do want to make sure we know how to do the proofs before we move on. Okay, so
YZ, do you mean XUZ?
Can I get my phone out?
XUZ, yes, not Y. Okay, wait, no. We've got 3 proofs to do. I'm so glad that I get to send this nice recording whenever one of your parents says, how come my kid is getting this grade in class?
Because they're stupid.
I'll make sure to send this and say, this is your son or daughter's voice on here.
Woohoo!
I'm
Hey, tell me you can't copy the fashion.
Okay.
No way, not.
19. XO
So you told me.
is congruent to OZ by given. XY is parallel to WZ, so I know alternate interior angles are congruent.
Okay.
And then I know vertical angles. So this is angle, side, angle. Did you guys see how I got angle, side, angle? It's an angle, there's a side in between, and then an angle.
Yes.
Okay? So let's make our statements and reasons. Number 1, XO is congruent to OZ. Given. 2, we've proven something is, we have something is congruent to something else. So we can move on to the next one. XY is parallel to WZ. This is given, but it doesn't say anything is congruent. So I have to state that next. That angle X is congruent to angle Z. Pull it together.
I didn't say
By alternate interior angles. Number 4, angle XOY is congruent to angle ZOW by vertical angles. And finally, triangle
OZW.
OZW is congruent to triangle OXY by angle, side, angle.
Hey, something you can't copy.
Okay, let's move on to 20. Shh. Move on to 20. XZ bisects WXY. It cuts these in half, so these are congruent to each other. WX is congruent to XY. And then XZ is congruent to XZ by reflexive. So this is by side, angle, side, that these are congruent to each other. So we've got my statements and my reasons. XZ bisects, no, Kevin. Angle WXY given. I can't move on because this does not state 2 things are congruent. So the next thing I'm going to do is angle WXZ is congruent to YXZ by definition, angle, bisector. Focus, guys. Knock it off. Whatever you're doing, stop it. And focus.
Don't you do this every year?
Okay, next. I've got WX is congruent to XY by given. Step 4. XZ is congruent to XZ by reflexive. And step 5, I can say triangle ZWX is congruent to triangle ZYX by side angle side. Questions about number 20? Or anybody that needs me to back up and go over 19? Number 21. WX is congruent to ZY. WX and ZY are parallel, so these are alternate interior angles. And then this is congruent by reflexive. So if we have statements and reasons, number 1, we're going to have, this is going to be side, angle, side, and then we're going to have to do CP, CTC at the end. So WX is congruent to ZY by given. Then we've got WX is parallel to ZY. Given. I can't move on because I don't have anything as congruent. So I need to have angle WXZ is congruent to angle YZX. Nope, that's by alternate interior angles. Yep. Then I've got XZ is congruent to XZ by reflexive. Step 5. Again, I have something's congruent to something. So now I can say triangle WXZ is congruent to triangle YZX by side angle side. Therefore, I have angle W is congruent to angle Y by CPCTC. Okay. Anybody have any questions about that proof before we move on?
No.
Is there any questions, any other parts of this review that you have? Okay, you need to, excuse me, you need to study for your review, for your test tomorrow with your review. Studying does not mean reading it. Studying means actually trying some of the problems again. The test is tomorrow.